Hey, everybody, and welcome to this Thoughtium Perspective series on the power of the in-person experience. I'm Anthony Ewing, CEO, co-founder here at Thoughtium, and I am absolutely thrilled to be coming to you all and kicking off our latest Thoughtium Perspectives series here live from the new Thoughtium HQ. It's probably new for, I don't know, the first 6 months. We can continue to call it new. It's an evolving space. Our team is really leveraging the extent of it and finding new ways to collaborate. We're bringing clients into this space in ways that we probably couldn't have imagined before. And today we bring you the kickoff to this perspective series. Really, really excited. This is a topic that we are very passionate about here at. We are passionate about this topic here at Thoughtium. We've over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, we've brought you perspective series to really go deep on those topics that are impacting, our lives and our experiences within the workplace. We've done everything from building great leadership teams to future-proofing your learning or culture at your organization, to how we most thrive and navigate change within our organizations. The perspective series that we're going to be kicking off today is one that is maybe more relevant than ever before. And it's really centered on how we as organizations can create more powerful in-person experiences. We're also going to be unpacking why the in-person experience looks, feels, and really should be planned for a lot differently today than it ever has before. So those of you who are in the throes of, organizing your people, bringing them together, whether it's once a year in a high impact, national meeting, or maybe quarterly in one of your quarterly team meetings, this episode is for you, for all of us who are at the throes of designing and delivering great in-person experiences. It's a big part of what we do at Thoughtium, and we are so thrilled to bring you this perspective today. But I could not do this alone. So we wanted to bring in one of the best. We're bringing in Michael Nordstrom. He is a newly minted vice president here at Thoughtium. He has been at the center of so many of our live in-person experiences, both here at Thoughtium and also, more importantly, with our clients. So Michael has been literally and figuratively out in the marketplace, understanding the power of in-person experiences. Michael, welcome, and thank you for being a part of this Perspectives.
Awesome. Great to be here, Anthony, and really excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that we like to do during these perspective series is really start to kind of like unpack the context with which we're working in. Okay, and we know that the in-person experience is becoming more and more prevalent as we step into greater change in our organizations. In more of like a post-COVID world, we're starting to focus more intently on our in-person experiences. And you and I did some research on the power of in-person experience, and we uncovered some really incredible stats that support why we should be investing our time and energy in designing and delivering great in-person experiences. So I want to throw a couple of stats out at you, Michael, and just kind of get your reaction to this in terms of, what you're seeing play out in the marketplace. The first and foremost is how much organizations are spending on in-person experiences. Today, this is a $98 billion investment across organizations in bringing their people together in person. And that's not just the day-to-day in the office. That is specific events, experiences, learning and development. Bringing folks together to create meaningful experiences has become a large budget item on the P&L. That breaks down to about $1,400 per employee per year. And that's a significant number for those organizations that might have hundreds or even thousands of employees. That's just the cost of bringing folks together in person for these unique experiences. So Michael, as I kick those out at you, these kind of like budget numbers, if you will, what sticks out for you in terms of the investment in person?
I think it really just speaks to how much we are prioritizing and see value in those in-person experiences. I think especially coming out of COVID, where we didn't have that option, we're really seeing now what the value is when we get serious and make an exceptional in-person experience. I'll also just say I think it shows also how we are getting just very serious about learning and development at organizations, and how that seat at the table continues to grow.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The research also suggests that this spend will be rising year over year. So the research suggests that we will be investing about 10% more each year in the in-person experience. So this focus, this attention on the in-person experience, it's not going to go away. We here at Thoughtium are extremely thrilled. We've been challenged over the course of the last 4 years to design and facilitate in both the virtual and in person, but we're thrilled to see this real swing back to the in person. At the same time, this perspective series is all about challenging you all, our community members, our clients, those folks on LinkedIn and YouTube, to understand that designing for today's in-person experience, planning for it, putting agendas together, thinking about ways to organize folks, it should and will look different today than it did 2 or 3 years ago, and it surely will look a lot different 5 years ago pre-COVID. So that's really, we're going to unpack kind of the nuances of the differences of the in-person experience today versus just 12 or 18 months ago, because it's a different world. So let's first start with kind of where we're headed in terms of these in-person experiences. We know that it's a big focus. It's even a big, line item on the budget. But Michael, what we're maybe experiencing are our clients are looking for more quality in-person experiences, and they might be doing that in exchange for how frequently we get together in person. So what are we seeing out there in the marketplace in terms of quality versus quantity of in-person experiences?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. We are seeing clients bringing people together overall less, but they're trading that in for a very significant investment when they do bring people in. They realize, you're oftentimes bringing folks sometimes across the country, across the world. So the amount of time and energy that's going into these agendas, this speaker preparation, and just the time that you're getting people together to collaborate and share ideas and strategize. We're just placing such a premium on that, which is why we're seeing, while maybe the frequency is going down, the overall quality is certainly going up.
Yeah, we work with a lot of large commercial organizations. I'll give a great example. We have a handful of clients in the life sciences industry, and this is where you might see the model has shifted the most, where you have traditional larger organizations, be it a biotech or pharmaceutical company, that for years, maybe even decades, have had a very particular cadence of in-person experiences that anchor on a single national sales meeting. And we have seen, at the doorstep of COVID, all of that was thrown out the window, and we went so hard in the virtual space. Well, now that we're able to be back in person, even the most traditional, even the most conservative organizations are asking the question, what really should this investment look like in terms of bringing people in person? And it should feel and look a lot different. And maybe we shouldn't subscribe to the same quarterly regional meeting and annual national sales meeting. So we've seen a lot of different models. We've seen organizations go to a single in-person event over several days. And we're going to get to what that agenda might look like and how it's different than what it was before. We've seen organizations say, you know what, we want to invest in more intimate, smaller, more local gatherings. So instead of having a large national sales meeting, we're going to have a handful of regional meetings where folks get together in person in their region and they connect in unique ways. And then we'll kind of roll some of that up in more of a central message virtually. Again, even the most conservative organizations, those that have won via a very familiar formula, are starting to rethink the quantity versus quality. The second kind of point around where we're headed is a little bit on the nature of these meetings. And Michael, we have seen a drastic shift in the essence of these meetings, or the key objectives of these meetings. Mm-hmm. And I want you to talk a little bit about yesteryear, when the objective of this meeting was really to set direction, and that would typically come through leaders on the stage, mm-hmm. to today, where we might have different objectives and it might be getting more people involved. Talk to us, Michael, just about the nature of our in-person meetings and how that's shifting.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of shifts happening. Number one, just overall, a lot of these events are no longer super lecture based experiences. We're not seeing speakers go on for hours and hours at a time and people just sitting in a chair in intake mode. We know that's not very effective. We also see a shift away from folks spending so much time leveraging these offsites or onsites to just information share, to give report outs on their departments and what's happening. We're seeing people are trading those types of modalities in for more time spent, brainstorming, strategizing, ideating. I think I read a statistic the other day that said something along the lines of when you pull people together for in-person brainstorming, you generate about 20% more ideas than you would in that virtual sense. So I think we're really just seeing that general shift when we're bringing people in person to spend more time at that strategic level, spend more time collaborating and connecting with one another rather than intaking a bunch of information that you're inherently going to forget.
Yeah, again, I go back to maybe some of the old formulas where you would rely on a very few leaders within the organization to both kind of set and design the agenda and also deliver the content. And we're going to get into this a little bit more in our discussion today, but we're seeing that our in-person experiences really should be a more organic, bottom-up type of environment that's not just conducive to getting together and collaborating and communicating. Yes, that's an important component, but the actual agenda and the agenda items should really be informed by our entire team as the kind of premium on these in-person experiences go higher. And that leads us to maybe our third supporting point in terms of where we're headed. We're seeing that organizations are approaching their in-person meetings far less like a collection of agenda items. This is kind of what I call the piecemeal approach, right? Where you've got maybe a meetings group and you've got a couple department heads that get together. You start with your 3-day agenda. You block off what between travel time, lunch, breaks. You throw in a couple keynotes from your leaders, and of course, there's going to be some regional or team time breakout. By the time you filled those in, A, it becomes a collection of the same old, and B, there's very little time for innovation, very little time for outside the box, thinking in terms of how we collaborate in these meetings. Very little time for the storytelling and the culture building that is required in today's in-person experience. So any comments, Michael, on this idea of moving away from treating your in-person experience like a collection of agenda items?
Yeah, I think that's a really great call out, Anthony. I'd say I think one of maybe the driving factors behind this, people being not really keen on these disjointed agendas is really the fact that employees are sensing more like tissue rejection when it comes to these on-sites and off-sites. So if something doesn't feel like it's coming from the org, if it feels like you have a ton of disjointed things that aren't connected, maybe you have speakers and other vendors that you bring in and have them own different parts of the session, it's really just not landing with folks. So that's why it's so important that folks are making sure the agenda is consistent, bringing all the speakers together and coordinating what it's going to look and feel like, not introducing redundant frameworks or models that there's already something in place in the organization that serves the same purpose. So really the intentionality behind the design and the coordination across all those sessions is becoming just more and more important.
I love that. So just some great ads. And, here in today's Perspective series, it's all about designing and delivering powerful in-person experiences. And what we've covered thus far is a little bit of a scan of the landscape. Where do we stand in terms of organizations' ability and willingness to invest in the in-person experience? What are some of the trends that we're seeing in terms of how we're designing and delivering in-person experiences? And it's clear that we're playing in a different sandbox today. What we want to reserve the rest of the perspective for is something that really excites me, which is, and Michael, I know you're here for it, which is like bringing our own hot take to this, right? Like, what is the Thoughtium perspective around powerful in-person experiences? And we really do have a perspective here because the work that we do, we are brought in at the earliest moment where organizations decide that they want to make this investment, and they bring us to the table to help them identify overarching objectives, start to understand the texture and the ethos of the meeting, early drafts of what the meeting agenda might look like. We're there as early as those very strategic discussions, and in many cases, we're at the meeting delivering experiences and helping organizations really maximize their time together, down to what these breakout rooms might look like and how folks interact at the granular level. So we got a few perspectives here that we want to share. And Michael, I want to tee these up. The first one being this concept of culture drift. And it's something that, it's making its way into kind of the corporate zeitgeist. I want you to share, our thoughts on culture drift. What is culture drift? And our perspective is we can leverage in-person experiences to impact and shape culture in a way that we can mitigate or prevent culture drift. So tell us what culture drift is first, Michael, and make that connection between culture drift and our in-person experiences.
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing to explore. So, as we're coming out of the pandemic, we've got a lot of employees working in remote or hybrid situations, feeling somewhat disconnected from the rest of the org. So this concept is really focused on that. It's people feeling disengaged and not necessarily a strong part of their company's culture. So with that, when we see these on-sites, these opportunities to bring folks together, it's so important for us to really, first of all, recognize that that's happening and really focus in on how can we build more connections, across different departments, across different relationships that folks have, and also just people's general relationship with the organization, feeling as though the organization cares about them. The organization is investing in their actual growth. So we see that come together as a real big piece of your considerations when designing an onsite. How are we fostering that collaboration? How are we fostering those opportunities for folks to meaningfully connect with one another?
I love that. I'll also maybe add a very specific example of where we can leverage the in-person experience to accentuate and bring to life culture as opposed to allowing it to drift. So many organizations out there are moving through a significant amount of change. Change has been such a constant discussion, between us and our clients. And rarely do clients come to us and say, hey, we'd like to put this change at the center of this 2 or 3 day national meeting that everybody's coming towards. It's more about managing change than it is about putting change at the center of the experience. And so, at Thoughtium, our perspective on change is that it's not about managing change. It's about understanding change, personalizing it, and then enabling ourselves and others to thrive in change. So the culture drift might be if you are avoiding what's really happening within the organization, particularly when you bring your folks together, because they are having hallway conversations, they're having lunch together, they are out at night doing fun activities. And that's where a lot of the hearsay is happening, the dialogue is happening, and that's where a lot of the culture is shifting. So why not put change at the center of your in-person experience? And there's some amazing ways you can do that. We've facilitated that and designed for that through storytelling, through just allowing folks to speak to and bring to life their experience in this change, comparing notes how they're experiencing the change. And we've just seen, again, culture take off versus culture drift, especially in those organizations who are bringing change to the forefront. Change should not be delivered on 67 slides in a keynote from your CEO at the front of the room.
Anthony, I love that. And one thing that I want to add to that is that it takes a ton of organizational awareness about what your people are feeling and where your people are and how they're actually coming into that in-person experience. So I think of one example. Currently, I'm designing a program for a large organization that's going through a ton of shifts. And we recently found out that 2 weeks before this shift, the employees are going to learn some news that changes, their understanding of their roles and what they're doing at the company. And this is going to be their first ever time to actually talk about it and to understand and discuss and really digest that in person. They probably have only been able to talk to their partner, their significant other, or their friends or family. This is the first time they're going to have that in-person opportunity to really dive deep. And so if you're not aware of that, if you're not planning for that, it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, there's so many specific examples, and I appreciate you bringing that one forward. Our first perspective is be aware of culture drift. Do not shy away from culture being a focus of your in-person experience. And there are ways through creating space in the agenda, in the design, there are truly ways that you can make culture the star, or let's call it even the fabric of your in-person experience, versus allowing it to be something that you feel like you've got to manage. Our second perspective is getting a little bit more granular. And, we are practitioners in the in-person experience. So as I mentioned before, we are not just, the SMEs in the room waxing poetic about how organizations should treat their next in-person experience. We are with you, sleeves rolled up in the details, ensuring that your in-person experiences are executed with absolute excellence. And in that, we've really cut our teeth in terms of, tactically how to execute an in-person experience. And our second perspective is on, how we should pay attention to the different modalities that have made their way into what we call this new hybrid experience. Right. At first, when we kind of stepped into COVID, it was virtual first, and everybody rightfully was acutely focused on how we engage folks from afar. As we kind of came out of COVID, we introduced this term of the hybrid experience. And the focus was on how can we blend the virtual and in person, because in many cases, you might need to accommodate for both at the same time. We've had a couple of years of that, and we've seen that there are some benefits to the hybrid experience, but there are some absolute drawbacks that we should not just be accounting for, but I think we should be shying away from. So, Michael, tell us a little bit about, the hybrid experience. Is it working? What are some of the things we should be thinking about? What is our perspective on the hybrid experience?
I'll be honest. While we appreciate the intentionality behind hybrid and see it as necessary in many instances where, frankly, you don't have the budget or can't bring everyone together as often as you'd like, we think to get the most out of these experiences, it's better to be all virtual or all in person. What we have found with a lot of these hybrid experiences is that it really strains the type of interaction that folks can have. And it's also very distracting. So when you have a portion of the workforce that's dialing into these in-person meetings, you're not able to drive those types of connection that you want in terms of how you're engaging folks in different activities and breakouts and whatnot. Again, you're really constrained in what you can do there. And then, of course, you're going to have more people with laptops open and more tech, around. So it's frankly more distracting as well for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. And as facilitators ourselves, Michael, you and I, we've definitely had this experience over the last few years of having to facilitate in a hybrid environment. So we want you to also think about your facilitators, think about your trainers, think about those folks that are in front of the room, really in charge of delivering this content and making connections. It's tough as a facilitator. We've all been there, right? You've got 50 people in a room and you've got two folks that are virtual. And in order to accommodate and deliver any type of experience to those two folks that are virtual, it takes 40, 50, sometimes 60% of your bandwidth and capacity as a facilitator to acknowledge the camera, to refer to the chat box, to ensure that those folks are interacting. And I think over the last couple of years, we've seen that the ROI of bringing folks in virtually in an in-person experience maybe is not as big as we thought it was. And so, we encourage folks to really design experiences for what they're made for. If you're going to bring folks in person, allow it to be a truly wonderful in-person experience, and allow those folks who can't make it to engage with the content and the objectives in different ways. I love this hot take, Michael, because it's one of those things that we're maybe thinking about in the boardroom or in the planning room, but we're maybe not saying, and that's what we're here for at Thoughtium. Our third and final perspective on building and designing and delivering powerful in-person experiences is really this idea that organizations have this new desire to build in-person experiences from within. And it's a little ironic that we at Thoughtium, a partner to many of you out there in the marketplace, a resource that you often bring in to help create these great experiences, are putting this perspective forward that at the end of the day, your in-person experiences should largely be built and facilitated from within. And that's a bit of a shift from, again, yesteryear's thinking, which was, hey, we've got this kind of half-baked agenda, and we'll bring in a bunch of outside vendors to make sure that these agenda slots or these agenda items are full. So, Michael, tell us a little bit about this movement to kind of like taking back our in-person experience and making it truly ours as an organization.
Yeah, I think going back to my earlier point, one of the big driving factors here is that tissue rejection. It's learners not really resonating with content that doesn't feel relevant or like it came from the organization itself. So I think here there's a few ways we should be really thinking about how can we build from within. I'd say number one, we just frankly got to be strategic in terms of looking at that agenda, looking at that content, making sure things do feel consistent. And when you are outsourcing or bringing in an external vendor or consultant, making sure that they adhere to a very collaborative approach in their development process, making sure the content is customized, that they are doing robust discovery, that you're getting a really good look at what that content looks like, that you're using the right templates. And frankly, I'll also just share a lot of vendors out there, Thoughtium including now, are starting to lean more into what we call train the trainers, which are opportunities where maybe you hire an external firm to support the development of content, but then they spend some extra time, with some leaders in your org to upskill them on to be able to actually run that meeting in the absence of that firm. So, having your actual people within your organization running those sessions, running those meetings and calls, even with content that was created by an outside.
Yeah, I'm having a little bit of deja vu, Michael, because I think it was just 2 or 3 weeks ago that you were here in Chicago. We were sitting next to each other on a different episode of Navigating Now, and you had this hot take, and I almost jumped out of my chair because I felt so passionate about the way that organizations bring partners into something as high ROI and as precious as your in-person experiences. And as Michael said, and I will reiterate it, if you are working with a vendor or a partner that is not sitting down with you and truly understanding what are the 2 or 3 things that you're really looking to solve for when it comes time to bringing new content or learning experiences or workshops into your in-person agenda, if you don't have a vendor or a partner that is sitting down and working with you to customize a handful of what we call situational scenarios or real world scenarios that they bake into this experience that truly are the DNA of what you're dealing with within your organization. If you have a vendor or a partner that is coming in and without any discovery or any of these upfront discussions or collaboration is just simply delivering an experience, you've got the wrong vendor. And we're going to call them vendors. We see ourselves as partners because this is stuff that we feel extremely passionate about. And we know that your appetite for these in-person experiences, it's different. And we know that your time and your investment is so much more than just simply putting agenda items together. And so we love this third perspective that, hey, you've got to take a little bit of control of this experience and make sure that it's a great one. And you've got to bring the right partners to the table to do that. Michael, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've brought the outside in. We've talked a little bit about where the in-person experience is going, and we've brought these 3 perspectives to the forefront. I would love to close out with a bit of a surprise lightning round with you, Michael. Are you ready?
Yeah.
And this is truly a surprise. I think I came up with this literally in the middle of the episode. But I think the world needs to know a few more specific things about Michael, you and how you like to approach in-person experiences. So, first question. What is your playlist like when people are walking into a workshop or heading out to break? What's one or two songs that might be included in your playlist? And get provocative here.
I can't name the actual song, but I'll tell you the playlist. It's either going to be lo-fi beats or some bossa nova. If it's early morning, definitely bossa nova, kind of like jazzy vibes, getting people ready for it. If it's the middle of the afternoon, especially at breaks and whatnot, lo-fi beats, just nice melodies to work to get into the zone.
And if it's bossa nova, look over your left or your right shoulder, and you might see Michael in the corner doing a little dance.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a little bit of a tip if you ever work with us.
Well,
What's an icebreaker question, or we call it a create the space question, that you've been using or have heard of that like really opens the space in an in-person experience recently?
yeah. One question that we ask sometimes is something. I think it goes. What's something that you learned in the last 3 months that you didn't know before? So getting people to open up about that, it generally is great. You get people with a wide variety of things. Some people starting to learn a new language, try a new sport, a new realization as they've been promoted into a people leader. And it's a nice way that people can open up to whatever degree they feel comfortable.
I love that. Yeah, that question. I mean, we ask that particularly in a lot of our leadership development programs. There's no better question at the beginning of an experience than to ask folks how they learn. That will get them in more of the learning mindset and give you some insights as well too. So I love that icebreaker question. Okay, last one, Michael. We'll get a little creative here. What's one thing that you feel all organizations could bring to their, or should be bringing to every single one of their in-person experiences? It could be something as small as the way they're arranging the room. It could be something as big as a certain type of session that you would have at an in-person experience. But like, if you had to pick one ingredient to a powerful in-person experience and install it in every one of our clients and our community's organizations, what would that be?
That's a tough one because I love half moon seating and bean shaped tables. I'll go with honestly fun. Like I think that's like something that we cannot forget. I actually had a fun coaching session with one of my really good friends, Allie, the other day, who's all about bringing out the inner child. And one thing that I learned from her was that people, when they are having fun and in play, learn so much faster. So making sure that while you might have very serious topics that you need to address and get through in these, on-sites and off-site in-person experiences, like making it fun and enjoyable and adding a bit of humility and levity to these experiences is absolutely critical.
I love that. Yeah, fun. It's, we always say that we want to include the fun, but like practically how you do that is a different story. And that's another kind of art form of the in-person experience. Michael, thank you so much for coming to the table today, sharing in this perspective. I want to personally thank you for just your practitionership, your ability to just be out there in the marketplace the way that you are, and then bring those insights back here to the team at Thoughtium and our community at large is quite incredible. And we just look forward to more of you out there and more of your perspective. So thank you for joining.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. All right. We want to wrap up this perspective series on powerful in-person experiences. We hope that you got a lot from the last 30 minutes. At the end of the day, these perspective series are really here to challenge you to find that 1 or 2% improvement in the way that you're approaching some of the biggest priorities within your organization or the way that you're executing them. We talk about the clouds in the dirt here for a reason. We're here for the high-level conversations. How do we approach something as big as a 4-day in-person experience differently than others? But we also love the dirt. So we encourage you also to roll your sleeves up and do some prototyping, do some testing. Get with folks who will be attending these meetings and ask them what they're looking for as well too. That is what we call practitionership, or treating your work like an art form or a craft. And this perspective series is designed specifically to help you increase that practitionership in what you do every day. We want to thank everybody for joining us here today. A big shout out to our LinkedIn community for tuning in, our YouTube family also for engaging with this content. Most importantly, this episode is one of a couple of different items that are part of the Perspective series. We have an article that is written by our very own Ashley Clark on her perspective and her personal experience in the in-person. We also have a toolkit, which is a 1 or 2 page summary of the content here today, and a couple of big questions that you can bring your organization to ignite this conversation of powerful in-person experiences. You can find all of these resources and all previous perspectives at thougtium.com/perspectives. And we really look forward to you diving into this content. Please feel free to reach out to myself, Michael, or anybody on the Thoughtium team if you want to talk about or unpack your next in-person experience, whether it's a couple of hours that you're spending with your team off-site for an afternoon, or something as big as an organizational 4-day offsite. We are here for those conversations. Thank you all so much for joining. We look forward to seeing you every Thursday at 3 o'clock Central. Have a good rest of the day.